Well, Warhammer fans, it's almost time. Space Marine 2 is right around the corner, launching this September 9th, so I think it's time we took a deeper look at what's coming our way. In this video, I'm going to dive into everything we currently know about Saber Interactive's highly anticipated hack-and-slash shooter. I will do my best to avoid any story spoilers for Space Marine 1, and I also will not be addressing any information discovered in the recent leak. I don't like leaks, and besides, there's really no telling what is and isn't changed from that dev build. However, do be aware that I will be talking about game modes, abilities, and other gameplay mechanics. So, if you consider those things spoilers, you may want to avoid this video. That said, everything I'm talking about can be learned from trailers, recent interviews, social media posts, and the like. Also, to keep from wasting your time, I'm breaking this video down into two parts, with individual sections. The first part will be for newcomers, or at least those unfamiliar with what Warhammer 40k is all about. While it absolutely will not be a lore dump, it will, I hope, set the stage for those who aren't wizened Warhammer 40k lore masters. The second part will be what I assume most of you want to know about. Gameplay, mechanics, game loops, pricing, etc., that kind of stuff. So if that's all you're interested in, we'll get to it in just a moment. And if you're interested in all of it, hey, awesome, the more you watch the video, the more YouTube will share it with more people. If you're interested in one aspect, then I've included time steps for you to get your fix quickly. Alright, without further ado, let's get to it. Warhammer 40k is, first and foremost, a tabletop game with collectible miniatures. Of course, since it was first released back in the late 80s, the franchise has expanded to multiple forms of media, not the least of which are video games. There is a fair bit of esoteric knowledge regarding the series' creation, so if you're interested in learning about that, I'd suggest looking into it more because it is way outside the scope of this little explanation. So, what's with the name Warhammer 40k anyway? Well, the 40,000 denotes the year that the game is set in other words, the very distant future. In this grim future called the Dark Millennium, the galaxy is controlled by the Imperium of Man, ruled by the God Emperor of mankind. Unfortunately for the Emperor, he was betrayed by his top general, and in the ensuing war, everything went to hell. After the fighting subsided, the traitors fled into something called the Warp, specifically the Eye of Terror, which we'll get to in a bit. The Imperium itself is in a state of never-ending war with the universe's many factions. From warmongering orcs, technologically savvy Tau, swarms of bug-like Tyranids, human-alien hybrids from the Gene-Stealer cults, a race called the Eldar with their Drukhari offshoots, and finally, Necrons, the ancient robotic race. None of those names are necessary to remember in terms of Space Marine 2, except for the Tyranids, which look to be the game's primary enemy faction. That said, there is no telling what direction the game's story may take. Longtime fans are probably screaming at me to not forget Chaos, and of course, there is Chaos. The four gods of Chaos exist within the Warp, which serves as a kind of parallel dimension. The rub here is that the Imperium needs to use the Warp in order to travel long distances in space, and yeah, I'm sure you can see that's not going to go well. This is also where we can quickly get into the weeds with rogue traders, astro telepaths, and just, oh my god, just so much more. For the purposes of this video, just remember that the Chaos Gods exist within the Warp, and they'd like nothing more than to come out and take over the main dimension. Now, back to the Imperium traitors that we mentioned a minute ago. After fleeing into the Eye of Terror, they started launching black crusades from within the Eye, hoping to destroy the Imperium. After many crusades, warp storms eventually split the galaxy in half, and now the Imperium and its armies are in a continual fight against the Chaos factions, which include Chaos Space Marines. And as you'd expect, these Chaos Space Marines are just about as tough and uncompromising as their Imperial cousins. But just what exactly is a Space Marine? In a nutshell, Space Marines are genetically and cybernetically augmented humans with heavy suits of armor. Space Marines also go by Astartes, or Angels of Death. Think Master Chief from Halo, but with even less patience. The Master Chief comparison is also apt in how the game world reacts to Space Marines. Other soldiers are awed by their often silent presence, and enemies instantly become wary when Space Marines arrive. They were originally created by the Emperor of Mankind during the Unification Wars in the 29th and 30th millennium, which eventually saw Earth united under the Emperor's banner. In modern times, becoming an Astartes isn't necessarily the end of the road for Space Marines. Through a series of very complicated procedures, Space Marines can ascend to become Primaris, think super soldiers. And then there are also Ultramarines, which are a sub-faction of Space Marines that are basically seen as the best or most influential. Bear in mind that this is a super simple explanation of the Space Marines. The story and the lore of these soldiers is mind-bogglingly complex, especially for outsiders, and this could easily take up multiple videos alone. But that very truncated introduction should be enough to get you to at least understand the setting a little bit. And let me tell you, if that all sounds cool but very confusing, I didn't even breach the surface layer of a Warhammer 40k story. Not remotely. Warhammer 40k there is a lot to it. Tabletop games, miniatures, novels, lore books, rule books, video games. Hell, even Henry Cavill is working on a Warhammer 40k TV show. So if this did pique your interest, good luck on the journey you are about to start. Alright, now let's get to the game proper, starting with the campaign. So, without going into story spoilers for 1, and with the intention of avoiding anything that might be spoilerish for 2, this is what you need to know about the story of Space Marine 2. In Space Marine 2, you play as Demetrian Titus, a titular Space Marine, and from the trailers it looks like the main enemy this time around will be the Tyranid Hive fleets. After a Tyranid infestation breaks out on a planet, the player is sent in to squash the bugs. How the story progresses is anyone's guess, but during the missions you can go in solo as Titus or with 2 other friends taking on the role of your battle brothers. Even if you do play the game solo, AI will control your battle brothers, so you're not alone most of the time. From what we currently know, the game will take place on 2 planets and possibly a moon. Avarax and what I assume is its moon Demirium, as well as the planet Kadakur. Avarax is a city planet that looks to have fallen or is in the process of falling to the Tyranid invasion, while Kadaku is a jungle world with scattered Imperial fortresses which similarly look to be taken over by Tyranid swarms. To me, it looks as if Kadaku may be the starting point for Titus's adventure, judging by the trailers we've seen so far. And the last planet is the one I'd argue fans are looking forward to the most, Demirium, which looks to me more like a moon than a planet. Either way, Demirium looks to be teeming with warp energies, which has a number of story implications that go beyond the scope of this video, but veterans are no doubt foaming at the mouth to learn more. Minute-to-minute gameplay unfolds the same for Titus as it does for his battle brothers, but each character does have their own unique ultimate abilities. Titus' special has him roar in defiance, buffing his melee abilities. Chiron uses a scanner pulse to mark all enemies in a large area, while Gadriel seems to have some kind of special grenade. Combat in general will be a mix of ranged and melee, with players executing brutal finishers to recover some health and shields, encouraging players to weave in and out of ranged and close quarters combat. There's also no cover system, so don't expect to Gears of War your way through the game. Aside from using the finishers to regain health and shields, you'll also have a limited consumable healing injector to recover some of your health pool. For the ranged side of things, you'll utilize a primary weapon, pistol, and grenades, with recoil on primaries and pistols being something you do have to manage. While in melee range, however, you'll utilize light and strong attacks, dodges, parries, pistol executions, and melee executions. When enemies glow blue, that's a telegraph that allows the player to attempt the parry mechanic. While normal attacks can also be parried, the glowy blue ones in particular are high damaging. And of course, as with any parry mechanic, if the enemy is glowing red, you'll need to dodge out of the way or risk taking a chunk of damage. And don't forget the aforementioned ultimate attacks for each character, as each of these are a big flashy ability that will give you an edge in fights. The game also has an extensive class, gearing, and cosmetic system, which we're going to touch on as we move into operations.
Your duty is not yet done.
The campaign will last roughly 12 hours according to Saber Interactive, but it won't be the only PvE content. Operations will be repeatable missions that tie into the campaign's narrative. Operations can be played solo with bots or with 2 other players in co-op. It's not clear just yet if the operations are more akin to roguelike procedurally generated content or simply missions with an open-ended repeatable structure, but we do know that they'll take place across 6 maps and be somewhat defense-focused. And considering there are only 6 maps, my bet is that there is some form of procedural generation at work here, be it for objectives, map layout, enemy types, or all of the above. Operations will also likely be the primary way PvE updates and added content come to the game. My personal thoughts, and this is just my own speculation mind you, is that Operations may take on a kind of Helldivers 2 quality where the community can fulfill certain objectives that change over time. Regardless, by completing Operations, players will unlock new equipment and cosmetics to deck out their Marines. In this mode, players will choose from 6 classes, and while we don't know the nitty-gritty details of all of them, creative director Oliver Hollis-Like has recently said this: "Unlike Space Marine 2's campaign, where you play a jack of all trades, in Operations you choose from 6 classes of super soldiers, each has a different core focus and special weapon. The tactical class seems similar to Titus's loadout, but not much else is known. Even comparing it to Titus could be wildly incorrect. But given the tactical name, I'm assuming this will be something of an all-around balanced melee ranged class. If the class perk icons are anything to go by, it seems scanning or a kind of targeting may be playing a role in this class's gameplay. Perhaps it's something like locational damage or weak point scanning, or maybe tactical may function more like a support role with buffs and enemy debuffs. The Vanguard class will utilize light weapons and a lot of movement with a grapnel launcher for quick traversal. In the lore, however, Vanguard is a super adaptable class, so it could be that the tactical class leans far more to the supportive style than I'm currently thinking, while the Vanguard is actually the all-arounder class. Looking at the skill perks, it seems the Vanguard will be heavily dependent on his grapple, which makes me wonder if it will function kind of like Deep Rock Galactic's Scout, being the only class capable of reaching certain areas on the map thanks to the grapple. The Bulwark class, as the name suggests, is your big close-range boy with heavy shields, armor, and close-range weaponry. If you're a fan of paladins in fantasy games or general sword and board playstyle, then the Bulwark is looking like it may be for you. And that's not pure speculation, as creative director Hollis hinted at in the previous quote discussing class roles. The first Bulwark perk looks to be some sort of banner, which will likely buff the party that's standing next to the standard, probably with some kind of defensive buff or HP buff, I would imagine. The Sniper class is pretty self-explanatory, but we do know that they'll be able to cloak themselves temporarily, and if you look at the skill tree, you can see that the first skill definitely looks like a stealth icon. And while the Sniper no doubt heavily leans into ranged combat, there are a handful of knife-like icons, so I'd expect the Sniper to, at minimum, be able to defend themselves when they need to. The Assault class looks to be an in-and-out melee class with a jump back to get in and disrupt the enemy before jumping back out and continuing their assault from ranged. The jump pack itself seems to be one of the class' signature skills, which means if you use a different signature skill, the class's gameplay may change, possibly radically. We also know one of the Assault class's team perks is Proven Efficiency that costs 40 armory data and provides the squad with 50% more gun damage. More on team perks in a moment. Finally, the Heavy will predictably wield heavy weapons and likely be slow as a tank. One of the Heavy's ultimate powers will be the Iron Halo, a defense ability that blocks incoming damage for the player and teammates behind it. And naturally, it wouldn't be Space Marines without some crazy weaponry, so let's take a look at some of the hardware we'll be wielding on the battlefield. Bolter rifles, the Space Marines' bread and butter, and yeah, from the trailer, there's every bolter under the sun represented. Heavy, auto, stalker, carbine, sniper, pistols, even more variants have been shown on the screen in various trailers. The plasma injector and pistol have also been shown, along with the melt-a-gun and some of its variants, both introduce even more classic Warhammer weaponry to the game. Grenades and stims will also be a part of your loadout, with grenades coming in various flavors like fragging and scanning, and stims likewise will probably have various healing effects aside from just straight up here's some health, I would imagine anyway. And last but certainly not least, melee weapons. Yeah, if you've seen any of the trailers, you've seen some brutal glory kill finishers with these beastly weapons. The Chainsword, Thunderhammer, Combat Knife, Power Sword, Storm Shield, and Power Fist are all confirmed to be in the game. Not much is known about how melee weapons will work in terms of upgrades, but they do feature prominently in the game, that's for sure, so some sort of system is probably in place. Then again, it could just be one of those everyone gets a melee weapon and the only real customization is what kind of melee weapon do you want. I considered going into more detail on each of the weapon types, but considering a lot of this info could change before release, I decided not to. There's really no point into getting too deep into the numbers when the numbers are really subject to change, not only before now, but even after the game is out. There'll be patches that will change the numbers. So let's wait and see for the theory crafters out there just what we're working with once the game comes out. As for leveling up your classes, you'll use an in-game currency called Armory Data. As you do missions and other activities in the game, you'll earn Armory Data that you can then spend on specific upgrades at the Battle Barge. And note, Saber Interactive have said that there will be no in-game store or in-game purchases. From what we've seen in the trailers, it looks like there will be multiple perk trees split between weapons and classes, with 25 seeming to be the max level. Each time you level up your class, it looks as if you're going to pick a new core class skill. There's also a row of icons with a smaller 3-person icon next to it, as well as a team category within the class perk menu. This looks like you'll be able to augment your entire squad with perks, kind of similar to how Helldivers 2 does with boosters. Along with the core class and team perks, you'll also have your choice of gear perks per class that doubtlessly customize your gear loadout to suit your playstyle. And lastly, each class has a signature ability to choose from, such as the Assault class's jump pack. Aside from class and team perks, you'll also be able to improve the game's weaponry using the Mastery system. This system seems to have multiple currencies involved in its use. Firstly, each weapon has its own experience point requirements, but the UI also shows 3 colored currencies, green, purple, and gold, which seems to correspond with the Mastery system's upgrade path of Mastercrafted, Artificer, and Relic. And lastly, the system has Mastery points, which seem to also be a required currency, but how all these points interact and fit together for the upgrade system, I'm not quite sure yet. If during the course of your gameplay you do become incapacitated, your companions, either controlled by players or AI, can revive you as long as they get the chance within a 30-second window. Obviously, communication is key during these sorts of moments, so it's important for those to be able to talk to each other, and for those unwilling or unable to use Discord or other comms programs, the game does have its own built-in voice. There is also a radial menu with a series of basic commands that you can use during battle if staying out of voice chat is more your thing. And while we're talking about communication, in a recent interview at GameWatch.com, crossplay was confirmed to be in the game, so you should be able to chill with your friends on different platforms. As for character progression, players will be able to unlock and customize their armors, including helms, pauldrons, greaves, breastplates, backplates, armor colors, and heraldry. However, players shouldn't expect to go too crazy with their customizations. In the GameWatch.com interview, director Hollis Like notes, Games Workshop are very strict about what appears in their universe and how that's portrayed. We can't invent things, it just doesn't work that way. So for lore enthusiasts, you likely won't have to worry about seeing bright pink bunny-eared anime space marines running around breaking your immersion. That said, we do know you'll be able to unlock base armor suits from lore-established Space Marine chapters. And using these base armor suits, you'll be able to further customize each armor piece with unlockables to craft your own Space Marine's unique appearance. There also appears to be a series of icons including the Ultramarines appearing next to chapter armors, which may indicate themed sets for each piece of the chapter's armor. Also, just like your armor, your weapons can also be customized with various skins. Though, like I've said, I don't quite understand what the upgrade path is for weapons. It may just straight up be skins. One of the more interesting bits about customization is that you can basically create your own Space Marine chapter with a pretty cool heraldry editor system. As we mentioned earlier, since Games Workshop is quite picky about how their IP is used, I'm a little surprised to see this as a feature for the game. Not that I'm at all upset about it, quite the contrary. Even the icons you can use include some heretical chapters, so even though Games Workshop may be picky, apparently we're still going to be running around with a wild mix of Space Marines in the world. This also opens the door for popular player chapters to be used and represented by others in the community, kind of like guilds or clans but without the structure. I can absolutely see a world in which some popular streamers create their own Space Marine heraldry that their fans rep in the game. Of course, for anything like that to happen, the game will need to be pretty good and have long enough legs, and that remains to be seen.
Eternal war demands eternal discipline.
For the PvPers out there, Warhammer 40k has the Eternal War mode, which may possibly mesh with the progression paths of operations, meaning upgrades from one mode can carry over to the other, but we're not 100% certain on that. It could be that both modes' progression is separate. But we do know that unlike the original Space Marine 2 will have dedicated servers on launch, with servers located in North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania. So PvP players will be able to enjoy the game without having to worry about peer-to-peer crap. In any case, player versus player content in Space Marine 2 comes in 3 flavors: Annihilation, Seize Ground, and Capture and Control, with each match being a 6v6 affair with one team playing as the Imperial Space Marines and the other side as the Chaos Space Marines. Annihilation mode is the most straightforward of the trio, being a straight-up team deathmatch mode where each team fights to get the most kills, with 1 kill equaling 1 point and 50 points being needed to win. For Seize Ground, it is a multi-control point mode where teams vie for control of a single area that moves around the map. Holding onto these areas also grants a spawn advantage, with the winner being the team first to amass the required point totals. The final mode, Capture and Control, is essentially King of the Hill, having both teams fight for control of 3 different areas around the map. The longer you control the area, the more points you gain until one team finally wins. Also, it should be noted that the classes you pick for PvP are the same classes you use in operations, but again, no official word on how the progression is handled between the 2 modes, but I'm assuming it will be cross progression because the alternative would be really awkward and clunky, I think, but we'll see. Alright, moving on from the gameplay and such, we're going to take a look at the pricing additions and the Season Pass stuff. This is where the information kind of begins to break down a bit. We do know the pricing structure of the additions, but the Season Pass is a little lacking on transparency, unfortunately. In terms of pricing and additions, I'm going to toss them up here on screen. You've got the standard edition for $59.99 USD that gets you the base game itself, as well as some cosmetic DLC, but not the 4-day early access. The Gold Edition, which is $89.99 for the digital version or $99.99 for the physical copy. This tier gets you the game, the Season Pass, the cosmetic DLC, and if you shell out for the physical copy, you get a Gold Steelbook. This version does get you the 4-day head start. The next version is a little weird. For $99.99, you'll get the Ultra Edition, which comes with the game, cosmetic DLC, 4-day access, the 4-day early access, the Season Pass, but not the Gold Edition Steelbook, even though you're paying the same amount. Instead, you get the Ultramarines Champion Pack, which includes 2 more cosmetics. And finally is the Collector's Edition, which at this point, good luck tracking one down. If you do find one, the original price was about $250, and it gets you the game, Season Pass, Ultramarine Champion Pack, Collector's Edition Steelbook, an art book, and of course a pretty badass looking Titus statue, as well as the 4-day early access. And as excited as I am for Space Marine 2, these annoying pricing schemes definitely sour my mood a bit. But what of that Season Pass? Well, this post from Focus Entertainment's website says that the Season Pass will give you more cosmetics, but new content such as missions, enemies, and weapons will be available to all players through regular free updates. Furthermore, they've also tweeted basically the same thing here. That all sounds great until you see this, which is also Focus Entertainment's own promotional materials. See that bit about unlocks new chapter champions? Yeah, that does not sound like cosmetics only, does it? That sounds like new classes may be locked behind the Season Pass. Also, see the fine print below, more content to be unveiled at a later date. It could be that the chapter champions refer only to the armor sets that it unlocks, but calling it champions makes me very suspicious. So if you are thinking about dropping some money on pre-orders, be fully aware that you're buying something without knowing the value that will be provided down the line. On top of some really weird, kinda sketchy marketing, which leaves things vague about the Season Pass. But it's your money, spend it how you will. Just know what you are buying and what you are not buying. Aggravating monetization aside, I'm very much looking forward to this one, and I'm cautiously optimistic that it will deliver on its promises. However, as with all things, there are some potential pitfalls to be aware of. Firstly, this game's development had some pretty high-profile business dealings going on in the background. The game was originally revealed in December of 2021, which means it was almost certainly in production or pre-production in February of 2020 when Embracer bought out Saber. Then just 4 years later this March, Embracer divested Saber Interactive, selling it to Beacon Interactive. Given Embracer's meltdown over the past couple years, there's no way the turmoil didn't impact Saber Interactive in some way. We're all just hoping the impact was on the business end of the studio and not the development end. Furthermore, a beta had been announced in 2023 only to be canceled just a couple months before launch. Now, this could simply be, as the developers have stated, that they're devoting the remaining time to polish up the game for launch. But the 2020s have shown us just how low companies will go to hide broken games from us until they're out in the wild and they have our money. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to be a little concerned, especially given how turbulent the business side of things has been for Saber Interactive during the game's development. And if you combine the last-minute cancellation of the beta with the fact that we're under 2 months from launch at the time of this writing, and we still don't have official system requirements, and that's concerning. While I would hate for Space Marine 2 to be an unoptimized mess of a game, I'd be lying if I said it would surprise me one bit. Fingers crossed I'm just being paranoid. So that's that. I hope this gave you a better grasp on what to expect from Space Marine 2. This is my first Everything We Know style video, so I hope to get better as I make more, and to be honest, I'm pretty on the fence about releasing this video at all. I don't feel like it's got enough info in it, and that makes me feel like I'm missing something big. I am by no means a Warhammer expert, and I'm sure I've missed some stuff, so let me and everyone else know down below what other cool stuff to be looking forward to, spoiler-free of course. As always, I hope you're having a great day. Stop by Thursdays if you think about it. That's when I drop my weekly gaming news videos. I'll be doing more of these kinds of videos going forward, as well as plenty other gaming related content. And with that, I'm gonna head out. See ya.